Namaste. It's good to see you here this morning. Today I'd like to talk about the subject of the process of self-realization. Usually I talk about this as a journey. It's like life is a journey. But there's actually a mechanism, a process that takes place along this journey. And if we understand this process, then we can understand how to harmonize with it to create the most amount of success spiritually in life that we're interested in having. The interesting thing is that not everybody is really interested in the spiritual life. People are very caught up in what they're doing, and they're so caught up in it that they can't see the bigger picture about what's going on in their life and what they might do to improve things. And they end up down the road, oftentimes people end up, they finally retire, and they think, oh, now that I'm retired, I'm going to take some time and get myself together. But by the time they get there, they're so messed up. It's a much harder task. Any teacher, particularly I'm thinking of musical instrument teachers, if you get a student who's been improperly instructed, you have to destruct what they did in order to then create good positive technique and habits. Much harder. You'd much rather start with a beginner than somebody who's gotten a little way down the road and they're just doing it absolutely wrong, but they're used to it. And then it's even harder to change. So I met a man in the Delhi area. I think I met him in 2005. And he was a shopkeeper, and I went to his shop numerous times over the next 4 years. And at the end of 4.5 years, I went back to America at that time. And so I thought, he was more than a shopkeeper. We had become friends in a certain way. We had a connection. And when I went to visit him, we'd have tea and we'd talk. And it was more than just a casual meeting of people. And I knew him for these years. And every once in a while I would talk a little bit about what I do and the spiritual life, but just a little bit. And so at the end of 4.5 years, I went to say goodbye to him. I said, I'm going back to America. I just wanted to say goodbye. And he looked, he was so disappointed. He said, oh, I'm so sorry that I didn't take the opportunity to spend more time with you while you were here. Well, there you have it. Not so much me, but the opportunity to connect with something beneficial spiritually. Well, okay, so fast forward 3.5 years, I arrived back in Delhi. I'm going to go see my friend. It's been 3.5 years. So I see him. Hi. You're back. Oh, I've got to take advantage of this. I really want to connect with you. I thought I was never going to see you again. I've really got to connect with you. Well, now it's been 6 months. Nada, nothing. Nahi. Zero. We had a nice reunion. He has my phone number. And this, why would he do that? He saw something valuable, but this is just an example. We do this all the time. Do you have a place that you've thought, I got to go in there and see what that is? How many of you have a place? Some, whether it be a business or a temple or something, or an area of interest. I've got to do that. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if something like this happened to you. Okay, almost everybody. And you think, well, why haven't I done that? I mean, we don't even know what potential. I mean, you might go in and go, I'm glad I never came in before. But a lot of the time you'll find something of value there, or you wouldn't have been interested in the first place. But you just don't do it. So why? Why don't we do the things that we know that would be helpful? Well, in order to understand this, we got to go way, way, way back to the way that God made the creation. You see, God is infinite consciousness, unmanifested. There's nothing but bliss. God's not thinking. God's just Om. We call it the watchful state, not even Om. Because Om is part of the manifestation of the creation. Satchidanandam, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. Unmanifested. Yoganandaji called it the watchful state. It's just there. Okay. So for some reason, this infinite consciousness has decided to, I think I'll make a creation today. We can't quite fathom why infinite bliss wants to do something like the creation. Because what is the creation? The creation is the making of a limited form of that bliss. That bliss becomes limited. First, just by thinking. Thought is limiting from infinite consciousness because a thought is only one. As soon as you start thinking, you narrow. That's why intuitive perception is so much more valuable, because it grasps larger realities. Reason can be useful, but very limiting. Okay. So then, God didn't decide just to think about a creation, decided to make lights and sounds and energy. This is the astral realm, light and energy. And then God thought, well, this really isn't far enough. Let's go let's create matter. I'm going to create matter, which gives the impression that it is the only reality, that there's nothing underneath it. That this is real. That this body is real, this personality is real, and there is nothing else. And there's a lot of people on the planet today that think that my brain and my body and my personality, this is it. And when you die, nothing. Zero. Or we've all grown up with stories about what happens when you die. Okay, so in Christianity, when you die, you go up to heaven or you go down to hell. And it's forever. Wow, that's a big stick. That should be motivating for people, shouldn't it? But even still, a lot of people just say, well, I don't care. Because I'm so convinced that this is the only important thing to me, this thing right here. It's so absorbing that I don't even want to consider anything else. How many of you have been to Disneyland? You've heard of Disneyland. Okay, a few of you have been to Disneyland. Of course, there's more than one today. But Disneyland is like, there are other good amusement parks, but Disneyland is like the original great amusement park. And the thing about an amusement park is that you go in there and absolutely everything that you see is fascinating. The little vendors and all of the little things that they have, and the main street with all the lights and the buildings are designed to absorb your interest. And then, of course, the rides. And in the early years of Disneyland, I don't know if they still do it this way, they used to have different kind of tickets. A, B, C, D, and E tickets. And the D and the E tickets were like the most exciting rides, and the A and the B things were, like the cable car and little rides that weren't real exciting. And so, of course, you had to be careful. what were you going to use for your D and your E ticket? What were you going to do? Because you had to decide. You couldn't go on everyone. I suppose you could pay extra. I don't even remember in those days. Now I think mostly it's an all-in-one pass. You just pay the fee. You go in, you do everything. But the thing is we can't do everything. You can't do it all. Or can you? The interesting thing about the creation is that we actually can do it all, but it takes a really long time. And so we get caught up in doing it all. So this process, how does this work? So God is everything, right? Yogananda said something very interesting that helps us to understand this. He said, every atom of the creation is endowed with individuality. Every atom of the creation is endowed with individuality. That means that every atom of the creation is an individualized expression of spirit. And this is the definition of the soul, individualized spirit. One of the ways Kriyanandaji often talked about it was, if you know the burner, the gas burner on the stove, there's only one gas. Of course, I don't think it's necessarily nice to call God gas, but nevertheless, there's only one gas, one source. But when it comes out of the burner, it has many. They're individualized squirtings of the gas, one source. We all come from, everything comes from one source. But each atom of the creation is individualized. Each one is endowed with uniqueness. Okay. So when God decided to make the creation, it wasn't an issue of the one infinite whole became many small individualized parts. So the ocean of spirit in the creation became a lot of small things. So each one of those atoms, when we say the soul is individualized spirit. The soul gets thrown into the creation and becomes something very limited. Goes all the way out into the minerals, to the atoms. And then if you think about going from infinite consciousness to the most finite, the smallest, the least ability for perception. I mean, how a molecule of a mineral, what's it thinking about during the day? And how long does it just sit there? I'm dirt. I'm a molecule of a planet. I mean, that could be there for a long time until it explodes and ends up. I don't really understand that process. The actual flowing of consciousness from each form. But Yoganandaji said that it's automatic. From the time that you're thrown out into the creation until the time that you get into human form, it's a very automatic process. It's I don't know what the average, they say 5 to 7 lifetimes, but 5 to 7 million lifetimes, but what's a lifetime to a molecule of dirt? I mean, so the amount of time that we're talking about, it's a long time. And you go through this automatically, so in that case, you don't have much to say about it. But now when you come to the human form, and the reason why the human form is at the top of the food chain is because remember that this process, yes, it's a journey, but the mechanism of the journey is a process of expanding consciousness. You go from infinite consciousness to the most limited. Boy, that's a bad day, huh? And I mean, talk about thrown into jail unexpectedly. Oh, I'm dirt. I was the infinite bliss. Anyway, so now you're a mineral, and then gradually there's greater and greater consciousness. And you can see, well, like microbes, they're busy doing stuff at least. And it's hard to imagine what it's like to be a bug or it's more pleasant to think of yourself as maybe a bird. That could be fun at times, at least. But nature's rough. Mother Nature, and you see these documentaries of the wildlife in Africa, and man, it's brutal. But this is what we call the circle of life. And physically, the body is born, the body dies, and it should be recycled. And the whole idea that we should put the body into a box and put it on a shelf somewhere, or put it in a hole in the ground and separate it from that cycle is one of the confusions of consciousness. And a good example of what we do once we get into the human form is we begin to become quite confused about what to do with ourselves. So it's the most natural thing to do when you go to the amusement park is to ride all the rides and eat as much as you can. Even if it makes you a little sick, you're going to just go out and have a great time. And basically this is what we do. We get involved in the human form and we begin to enjoy some things and not enjoy other things. So we have pleasure, I like, I want; pain, discomfort, I don't want. And we begin to think that life is based on doing the things you like and avoiding the things that you don't like. And we think that the things that we like are happiness. Now, we've discussed this in the past, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this thought. Just a reminder, happiness is not pleasure. Happiness is not excitement. Happiness is that infinite consciousness that we came from. That is the source of all true happiness, and we're never going to be satisfied until we get back there. But it isn't until the human form that we can begin to make conscious choices about how to proceed in life. And unfortunately, we spend a long time consciously choosing to indulge in the things that we enjoy and to avoid the things that we don't enjoy. And we go through this emotional response to life of ups and downs. And all of these actions, everything that we do creates and expresses energy. We call this energy a vritti. Each and every action creates a vortice of energy. This energy represents what we call our samskars, our karmas, the seeds of committed energy that are connected to our reactions to all of these likes. I like this, I want this. I don't like this, I don't want that. So all of these vrittis, these samskars, these karmas, where are they? They're in the spine. They're all of the centers, the chakras. The chakras are like the sun of each center. It's like there's the planets that surround each one of those centers is all of the karmas associated with the qualities of consciousness connected to that center. So you always see that the chakras are always radiating in varying degrees, but the energies of all of these reactions to life, and we carry them from life to life. So everything that we've liked and disliked previously, the sum total of we don't even know how many millions of incarnations are living inside of us. And so we react to this world. Oftentimes we don't even know, why did I react that way? And sometimes, we go, well, because in your childhood, blah, 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 blah. This is the psychological thing. But there's a lot of life that cannot be explained by the past of this incarnation, which can be easily explained by the past of a previous incarnation. child genius. It's not, DNA. Yes, that DNA allows the mechanism of the body to channel that potential, yes. And the environment to which the soul has been drawn into gives activation to that potential. But it's not the source of that potential. That potential was already there. So now we have within us a mixture of what we describe as tendencies. Some visible, some not visible. Mostly we say, well, my tendencies describe my personality. And my personality has determined what those tendencies are, affected by my environment while I was growing up. This is the small view, a very limited view. So when we see the bigger picture, we realize that the soul's been going through the creation, picking up a lot of baggage. When they climb the Mount Everest, they have to carry stuff up there. We are carrying on our backs a whole universe of vrittis, of seeds. In the Netherlands, they've got a storage facility they've tried to gather all of the seeds of every known plant, just in case of disaster. So if there's natural disaster, or if there's nuclear disaster, whatever, they have a big stash of seeds. All of the seeds of all the plants that they could find. And they store them there. We have portable storage units. But our seeds are these karmas from the past. Now, there's a point at which we begin to recognize that the baggage that we're carrying isn't leading to happiness. We begin to recognize that we've got to get rid of some of this baggage. But here's one of the tricks. We have most of us, grown up with the idea that to become free, to become reacquainted with the ocean of infinite joy, we have to get rid of all that baggage. That's not exactly correct. And this is really good news. What we need to do is redirect the energy that we've been putting into life on the outside and begin to direct that energy within. And what we're doing when we do this, Kriyanandaji described this as, all of that baggage is like an ice covering on a large body of water, a lake or an ocean. So it's all ice. So you think to get to the water underneath, you've got to melt all of the ice. But he said, no, this is not correct. All you need to do is drill down through one point. And if you do that, if you drill down through one point, you get to the water. And if you want to, once you've drilled down into the water, you could use that water to melt all the rest of the ice. And that is what we're trying to do. The process is that what we need to do is, yes, while we're doing the process, we will get rid of some baggage, a fair amount of it actually, but not all of it. And what we need to do is redirect the mind within and drill through the things that keep us from looking inside, the things that keep us looking outside. We've got to take control of ourselves and say, I'm going in, I'm not going to stay only out. What's interesting is that the more successful that you become at connecting inside, it makes everything in outward life easier. But the ego personality isn't convinced. There's a lot in this world. You see, when you go to Disneyland, isn't it interesting? You're already there. Whatever advertisements they've done, in the newspaper, in the phone book, on television, you have all of these advertisements. They convinced you to come, marketing. So you get there. But so you've already bought the product, right? You've bought Disneyland. You went, you paid for the ticket. But when you get there, everything says Disneyland on it, and they want you to buy that too and take it home. And so you not only go to Disneyland, but then you just become, everything becomes Disneyland. And you can't see anything else. And this is this process of coming through the creation, expanding our consciousness. When we get to the human form, see, it's automatic before that. We don't have a choice. But now, once we're in the human form, we have a choice. And those choices are like sticky. They're really sticky. So as soon as you touch one, it sticks to you. And then it just starts piling up. And that's it. We got stuck with all this karma. We can't just sweep it out. But Kriya Yoga is designed for sweeping. Because we need a certain amount of unstickiness to be interested in the spiritual life and to practice. You have to get to that point where you'll go and do something. You won't just see the book, you'll get the book, read the book. You won't just see the temple, but you'll go to the temple and you'll do something there. Many people go to the temple, they just sit, they go in the outside and they walk around. They actually go in even. Then if they go in, what are they doing in there? Very little. Because their minds are so whirled up. They think, oh, let me throw a few rupees at the altar. Maybe that'll help. Yeah? And this is universal. Every religion in the world is collecting money, and I'll talk about that later. But you can't buy your way into the ocean of spirit. You can buy your way into some amount of good karma. When you give to others freely, you do get some good karma for it. But what is good karma? An ice cream cone. Someone will give you some money. Okay. But that isn't the ocean of happiness. So it's not just about ice cream cones. Everything that you can imagine that isn't even in the remotely interesting to you, you've either done it or you'll need to do it unless you can unstick yourself from all this stuff. And if you've seen any of these videos on YouTube about what people are doing in the world today, it's unbelievable. The variety of ways in which people are absolutely enmeshed and occupied with the creation. And God is really creative. And God is having a great time. God's in no hurry for the creation to be closed. He wants to keep the amusement park going. So we can stay here as long as we want. But if you've ever been to the amusement park in the afternoon, late afternoon, you're going, oh man, I'm really tired. And if you stay from the moment, because usually you stay from the moment they open till the moment they close, because it's one big thing, So, oh man, by the time you're done, you're exhausted. And the thing is, towards the end of the day, you're not even enjoying it anymore. You're just determined that you're going to win. I paid, I'm here, I got to do it. I'm not even having a good time anymore. I'm going, yeah. You're exhausted. It's too much. So what do people do when life is too much? They self-medicate with the different kinds of distractions. And it's endless. Relationships that aren't a good idea, drugs, alcohol, sex, crazy job ideas, falling asleep at the wheel. I mean, people, they're driving down the road, boom, you're gone. Reset, you got to come back. In the early video games, if you got killed, you had to go all the way back to the beginning. Now you only go back to the beginning of that level. So if you were into any of these early video games, you could get a long ways. I mean, you spend an hour trying to get up to a higher level, so that by the time you get there, if you die, you're like, oh man, it's going to take me a long time. Imagine you die, you have to be born again. You have to figure out how to use the body. And, just digesting is a problem. Then you got to learn language. Then you got to figure out what to do with these things that are called parents and siblings and school and the environment that you're living in, before you can really get into what am I here for. It takes a long time. So now you think in this process, there is, in some card games there's a wild card. There are 2 wild cards in the creation. One lives on this shoulder, one lives on this shoulder. These are the forces of the light and the darkness. The forces that try to keep us limited, and the forces that try to bring us home to infinite spirit, with the light and the dark, the good and the bad. What I like to say, beneficial, not beneficial. Beneficial is that which leads to joy, to connectedness, to expansion. Not beneficial is that which limits you, leads to suffering, aloneness, limitation. But those wild cards in life are active. You can use, as in India we use the term Maya. Maya can be both sides into a certain degree. It's the power of this world to keep you connected to the world. It's the flashing lights. It's going, stay here, have a good time, don't feel good, that's okay. And it just keeps you wanting to be distracted. So now the world is distracting us, and the world is consciously doing so. Because God has soldiers. The soldiers of distraction, and then of course the saints, the soldiers of upliftment. Say, no, come home. So now the forces of good are not only the saints, but the forces of good can be a wise parent or a grandparent who says, look, I've been through it. Let me tell you, these were the things that worked, these were the things that didn't. But do the kids always listen to the grandparents? No. Of course, the grandparents don't always know. But if you had a wise grandparent, did you listen? And so this process is that we're knocking about until we finally figure out that we have to do something about our happiness. We're tired of being confused and unhappy. The good news is that when you get to the point where you begin to broadcast sufficiently to the universe, I'm interested in getting the heck out of this crazy ride. I want to know what's going on, and through that increased knowledge, I'm going to seek the train that's going home, back to the ocean of bliss. But of course, what happens when you go to the temple? All of the vendors are out front, yeah? And they're even saying, oh, buy these flowers. Well, that's a good thing. But then you go to buy the flowers and you have an argument about the price. So now you're going to go to the temple with anger? And I wonder how many people get so involved in the vendors that they may not even make it into the temple. But if they do, they have merchant consciousness. They're thinking about what kind of deal they got on their offerings instead of the purpose of going to the temple. It's tricky the whole time. The whole way. When you're drilling that hole in the ice to get to the water underneath, until you break through, you're in the ice. But the practices that we do are designed for that drilling process. And the more we practice this science, the science side of yoga, the more it's like the quality of the cutting edge of the drill. I mean, you want to dig a hole through the ice, you can use your tongue and lick. That's not a good situation. You can take a toothpick and, poke around. And a lot of people do this in the spiritual life. They're just poking around. Oh, I'm going down a little bit. You can get part of the way down and you see stuff in there. Oh, look, it's a frozen bug. I wonder how it got there. Oh, bugs are interesting. I think I'll go to school and study bugs. I guarantee you someone's done that. Yeah. So suddenly, I'm going to stop drilling and I'm going to go study bugs. Yeah. Or, a butterfly. Oh, that's a beautiful butterfly. Oh, isn't that one of those king butterflies? Oh, king. I wonder. I'd like to be a king. So now you got to go be a king. It's so easy to become distracted. But to drill a hole, a serious hole, it's not a one-person operation. You need a team. You have a crew of people on the whole system. You've got a mechanism that's the latest design, quality materials, and you got a crew of people that know what they're doing, that have done this before, or have been involved in the process long enough that they know the basics. They can get you going and drilling. And this is, of course, the spiritual family. And it's the whole thing, all the way from the first day you come, you're a part of the family if you want to be. First time I read autobiography, I got it, my family. When I first came to Ananda, I got it, my family. Not everybody's that lucky. I had that good karma. I must have done something in the past. I don't know what it was. But each and every one of us that is here today has done something to get here. The process that you've been through, your karma, everything that you've done to this point has brought you here. Some of you are Kriyabans, are practicing Kriya already. Some of you are not. But you've already got the incredible good karma to be interested. You're not out on the street thinking, wow, I wonder what's in there. You're in here. But what will happen next? Well, I go, that basement is architecturally not really the best design. I think I'll go study architecture, figure out what would be better. Or the tiles aren't perfect. I wonder what so now you're going to be a tile mason. And that might seem silly, but if you think about this, people that you've met in your life and you look at their life and you go, that wouldn't be too bad. That would be interesting. We all have those things. Something that would be interesting. And that interesting thing in itself wouldn't be bad. God made the creation. God's having a good time. We can have a good time. But it wouldn't in the past, people thought that in order to drill to the water of spirit, you couldn't do anything else. But Yogananda Ji communicated to us that, and the Gita teaches the same thing, it's not about so much about what you're doing as the way that you do it. The consciousness with which you do it. You can be a doctor, a business person, a parent, a single person. You can do any job. But if you have the right consciousness, God is doing it through you. You're not doing it. Your ego is not doing it. And so what happens is when we begin to do spiritual practices and we start drilling down through the ice, we begin to perceive that more and more remember, we're expanding consciousness. We begin to realize that I'm connected to the ocean. I am not separate. I am not a wave. I am the ocean. And the deeper you get into meditation, the more experience you will have of the ocean. More and more and more. As long as it's limited, you haven't broken through. But eventually, you'll break through and you'll be in samadhi, oneness. Oneness with the ocean of spirit. But there's still all that other ice, right? What are you going to do about that? Well, in one side, you don't need it. You don't care. You're consciously one with the ocean of spirit. But as a practical matter, in order to stay there, in order to stay and not just, oh, wow, this is great, and then back in the body, oh, that wasn't, why did I have to come home to the body? I wanted to stay home in spirit. What happens is once you become identified with the ocean, it's called Sabikalpa Samadhi, conditional oneness with infinite spirit. Then you begin to really shift. This is only once you get there can you really begin to identify with the ocean and become so then absorbed in the ocean that instead of looking from limitation towards the ocean, you start looking from the ocean towards limitation. And you begin to recognize that you are spirit. And there's a certain point at which that identification becomes so complete that you enter into what's called nirvikalpa samadhi. That's unconditional oneness. Now, the interesting thing is that, and this is the good news from before about the karma, is that it's actually only once you've gotten to nirvikalpa samadhi, unconditional oneness. No, that's wrong. Yes, that's correct. So you get to nirvikalpa samadhi, unconditional oneness. You're described as a jivan mukta. You're free, but you're not a siddha. You're not supremely free, because you have not melted all the ice. You have not released all the karma. So it's only once you get to being one with God, then from that spirit you look back and you can look at all of your whole journey through the creation, recognize the reality of the ride that it was, the journey that it was, and then release each of those karmas. So this idea that we need to be outwardly perfect personality, always healthful, always healthy, never make any mistakes, in order to be liberated in this lifetime, this isn't correct. We need to be dedicated to drilling through the ice of our confusion, our restlessness, into the calmness, through a technique like Kriya Yoga, deeper and deeper stillness, till you begin to penetrate through to the water of bliss. And then you start bathing in the bliss, more and more and more, until you become fully identified with it. Even when you've tasted the bliss, you get to the bliss, you experience the ocean, even then you're not safe. Even then, because you've come back to the body, you could have a really bad day and end up becoming an architect. You're only safe when you've reached unconditional oneness. Now, the team is the spiritual family, and most importantly, the captain, the guru. The guru is the boss of the crew. The spiritual family is the crew, and the boss, the guru, is the guy who's been there, done it all, knows all of the tricks, knows everything, that you need to know, and most importantly, has the power to reach over and help you, to raise you up as well. And it's in this relationship with the guru and the spiritual family that we experience satsang. Satsang is a gathering, but most importantly, it's a magnetic connection to truth. What's truth? God, bliss. How do we feel it? In harmony with our spiritual family, with the Guru. You can get close without the Guru, but you can't get all the way. So this process is important to understand and to recognize that don't worry so much about what you're doing on the outside, what your job is. Yeah, you can adjust those details, but most importantly, it's what's going on in here. And this inner transformation is what gets you freed from all of that karmic baggage. And it's only once we commit ourselves to it and really dedicate ourselves to it and invest in it, meaning our time, our energy, our love, our hearts. We have to get to that stage where it's basically the most important thing in your life. Until then, you can make progress, but you won't actually break through. Everything positive thing that we do in life is going to help us. So if you don't make it in this lifetime, every positive thing you do will help to bring you back to the path. But we don't know how we could get jostled in the crowd, and it could take some time to get back to where we are today. There was a woman in the ashram with Yoganandaji, and one day she left the ashram, and Master said, she'd stayed one more day. Just one more day, she would have been freed from the reasons why she left. But no, she left. He said it would take her, I don't remember, 100 lifetimes or something to get back to where she was. But another woman left, and she came back. They said, how can you come back? I says, what, should I worship my mistakes? As soon as you recognize that you've made a mistake, fix it. Don't wallow in the mistake, because that just leads to more mistakes. So this process is very well understood, and Kriya Yoga is one of the most efficient ways for the drilling. Going into deeper and deeper levels of calmness to experience the bliss of spirit, to become identified with it, and then to be fully processed and back into the ocean of bliss from whence we've come. So don't worry about where you've been. Don't worry about what you haven't done. Focus on the good things that you can do now. They can only lead to positive results. Namaste.